Let's now consider the marriage vow. Having considered and looked at this matter of semen absorption by the woman, and how adulteration occurs when she absorbs semen from more than one man, as we move into this part 2. Psalms 15 is a psalm of David. And by the way, David means love. And if we want to know what love really looks like, really means, we have to go to 1 Corinthians 13. We'll consider a little of that in a moment. Verse 1 out of Psalms 15. O Yahweh, who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy hill? And that's where we all want to end up when it's said and done. Verse 2, he who speaks truth in his heart, i.e. he speaks that marriage vow for better or for worse, and truly means it and stays with it. That's the kind of person that'll dwell in Yahweh's holy hill. Verse 4, he who swears to his own hurt and does not change. Oh my, I wish I'd have never married him or her. It's so hurtful. Hey, we swear to our own hurt. We do not change. We stay with it. And 1 Corinthians 13, 7 through 8, speaking of love, truly, godly, righteous love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, never gives up hope in that marriage, endures all things, even though that marriage is hurtful, he or she is hurtful. Love never fails. That's the kind of love that Yeshua wants to see within us and build within us, a person who swears to his own hurt and does not change. As we consider the marriage vow, let's look at Ecclesiastes 5, verses 4 through 6. When you make a vow to God, do not be late in paying it, for he takes no delight in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Do not let your speech cause you to sin, and do not say in the presence of the messenger of God or Elohim, i.e. the pastor, the priest, the rabbi, the justice of the peace, etc., that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry on account of your voice and destroy the works of your hands? It was a mistake, you say? Well, we'll return to this so-called mistake at the end of the presentation with a discussion of the Israelite-Gibeonite covenant of Joshua chapter 9 and the battle of all battles in chapter 10. What is the most dangerous place for newlyweds? In my opinion, it's the church, the assemblies, the Sabbath school classes, the Sunday school classes, before some pastors and teachers that teach there is a so-called exception clause. Why? Well, a woman is designed needing great security. That's just the way Yahweh designed her. And the husband, who's generally larger than the wife, picturing that he is to be the protector and provider, is designed to provide that security. And when she hears, till death do us part, for better or for worse, what better security blanket, so to speak, than that? But if that husband fails to speak up when they later hear a discussion of the so-called exception clauses, and he doesn't say a word, then that plants that little seed of insecurity within her that can grow into something that can cause major problems within that marriage. Let's consider Jeremiah chapter 3 and Yahweh's vow, his marriage vow. A lot of folks look at this and say, well, look, Yahweh got out of his, therefore I can get out of mine. Well, let's take a closer look, beginning with verse 1. God says, if a husband divorces his wife and she goes from him and belongs to another man, will he still return to her? Will not that land be completely polluted? He's referring here to Deuteronomy 24 that we discussed in part 1. But you, and he's speaking here of Israel, the northern 10 tribes, not Judah, are a harlot with many lovers. And then most versions read, yet you turn to me, declares Yahweh. Implication, yet would you turn back to me with all this harlotry you're involved in? I submit that is a mistranslation. And it should rather read, yet would you return to me? Do I have anything to back that up? I think we do. The Hebrew word shub is a verb meaning to turn, to return, to go back, to bring back, to reestablish, to be reunited, to restore, according to the Complete Word Study Dictionary. So let's look at where the verse, the word is used in other verses. Verse 7, I thought, after she, again is speaking of Israel, has done all these things, that she would return, there's a word shub, to me. But she did not return, shub, and her treacherous sister Judah saw it. In verse 8, and I saw that for all the adulteries of faithless Israel I had sent her away, and given her a writ of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah did not fear, but she went and was a harlot also. I think if you'll do some deep research into that phrase, and given her a writ of divorce, it actually reads given her writ of divorcement. She was seeking it. She was the one taking off. Yahweh simply gave her what she wanted. And in verse 12 of Jeremiah chapter 3, go and proclaim these words towards the north. And that's, by the way, where the northern 10 tribes were, north of the Holy Land, up in the land of then called Scythia, as they were moving on into Europe later. And say, return. There's that word shub in Strong's number 7725. Faithless Israel, declares Yahweh, I will not look upon you in anger, for I am gracious, declares Yahweh. I will not be angry forever. And again in verse 14, return, O faithless sons, declares Yahweh, for I am, not I was, but I am a master, or married, as the King James Version reads, to you. I'm a master, I'm a husband, I'm married to you. And that word master is Strong's number 1116, Baal, and the meaning is to marry, and is rendered to be a husband, marry, or married. Malachi chapter 2, verse 13, this is another thing that you do. You cover the altar of Yahweh with tears, with weeping, and with groaning, because he no longer regards the offering or accepts it with favor from your hand. Yet you say, for what reason? Because Yahweh has been a witness between you and the wife of your youth, against you whom you have dealt treacherously, though she is, not was, but is, your companion, regardless of whether you've given her a so-called divorce certificate, and your wife by covenant, the marriage covenant. Let's look at the definition of treacherous. It means not to be relied on, not dependable, or trustworthy. Question, can Yahweh rely on us, depend on us, and trust us to indeed stay with our vow for better or for worse? I mean, like when it gets really worse? Or do we take off? And if so, have we failed Yahweh's test? And let's ask ourselves, if he cannot rely on, depend on, and trust us with tough, and I mean really tough conditions in this age, then can he rely on, depend on, and trust us with really tough assignments for the future ages and his kingdoms, when we will be ruling and reigning with him? But you might say, he or she is a pure pagan. Well, let me ask you, just who do we think we're going to be working with in coming kingdoms and eons of time, if not pure pagans? Question, when and where are we to receive our training for our future work assignments? Could it be right here now in our own home, with our husband and wife, with acquaintances, with employer-employee relationships? And question, let's ask ourselves, are we going to bail on Yahshua in future ages and assignments also? Malachi chapter 2, verse 15. What about the children? This verse is translated many different ways by different versions of Scripture. I strongly prefer the interpretation that J.P. Green in his interlinear version of the Scriptures has put forth. I think he's right on, where he renders it like this. But not one he did make. In other words, Yahweh, when he brought the two together, he made them one. And a vestige of the Spirit of him, in other words, he put some of his Spirit within each one of us. And we can see that in Romans chapter 1. And to what or why? Why did he make them one? Why did he make us one with our husband or wife? Answer, he was seeking a seed of God. He was seeking a godly seed in the way of those children. Do we need a second witness for that? We can see that later when we get to 1 Corinthians 7, verse 14. And now we can see why Yahweh says, I hate divorce, says Yahweh, the God of Israel. And let's ask ourselves this question. If we divorce our husband and wife and tell the children it's just too bad, we can't handle that any longer, we've got to get out of it, then what are we teaching our children? To run from our problems or to face up to our problems?